And at 10, dolls. Up at around the northeast section of the island, there's a little section inside like the track line that contains another Easter egg that I'll talk about later. But on the left half of this interior section, there's an area just filled with dolls. And I mean like filled. This whole section of slightly forested area looks like it was ripped straight out of a bad Riverdale episode. There's like dolls hanging from trees, from ropes. There's even stuffed animals hanging around the open fire that's still lit, meaning that people were here recently, especially since it was raining when we first got to the island. And there's like no explanation for it. My first thought was that this could be a reference to the Island of the Dead Dolls in Mexico. The Island of the Dolls, originally owned by Don Santabarrera, is full of dolls hanging from trees and buildings that are covered with cobwebs and insects. The place was named in the 1950s when the dolls started randomly appearing on the island. But it could also just be a place where the residents of the island had made a shrine to the sons and daughters they've lost to Charles, since there are no kids on this island, which is odd given how many married couples and fun singles there are here. Pickle Lady in particular seems like she'd just want the pickle raw, if you know what I mean, as a cucumber. And at 9, rubber duck. At the northernmost part of the island, the peak at the northwest corner, there is a small little beach. On your way here you will run into some cultists, but should you make it the whole way alive, you can find a giant yellow floating duck just there off the coast. Around 40 meters out, actually. This is certainly an interesting Easter egg, since not only is it a giant rubber duck, but also it's somehow staying still despite there being a storm and it floating in the ocean and you know, it being a giant yellow rubber duck. Of course, this doesn't have to make sense. It's a video game about a giant demon train spider, but given all the other things happening on the island, maybe this is just another monster. Maybe the reason it's not moving is because it has like extremely long legs that are keeping it in place. And based off their reaction to Charles, maybe the duck is a little scared to actually reveal themselves. Or maybe it's supposed to be a reference to something that I'm just not understanding. I don't know, is there like a duck in Thomas the Tank Engine? Or is this like another gaming reference? Is this a JoJo reference? Let me know if you have an idea in the comments. But also, you can't actually see if it has legs because as soon as you go underwater, you teleport back to your train. And it ate pumpkin eater. There are multiple locked doors throughout Choo Choo Charles. Sometimes you have to find the key to unlock it. Other times it's a key to someone's house, so you literally can't go inside, and plus there's actually no room in the house if you end up no-clipping and trying to look in there. But there is one door in particular that is not only creepier than the others, but also isn't unlockable at all, but still has a room. Up on the northeastern area of the island. It's basically next to the Island of the Dolls. It's in that same area. Off the track you can find a cabin surrounded by a moat of spikes, no doubt to deter Charles. However, in this cabin there is a mask of a cultist hanging on a bedpost and a gate leading towards the basement. Of course it's the basement. It's always the creepy basement. The basement for most players will just contain 7 scrap, but there is also a locked door down here. When I was playing, I didn't really pay much attention to this. I thought that maybe I would be back after I got the key at some point, but you never are. Because that's not meant for us filthy casuals or the people who are actually playing the game normally. Behind that locked door is a room that contains just a table and a note. The note, should you read it, simply says you shouldn't be in here because, you know, you shouldn't be. It's out of bounds. And if you're in there, you're a cheater, pumpkin eater. Get it? There you go, it all comes around, that's the title of the number. It is 7, island location. We also don't know where Arcanerum is located. It's closer to the mainland than most might assume, since after all we do row there with Eugene, but other than that we get basically no information towards where this game actually takes place. In like a map world geography sense. Not like we know it's Arcanerum, but like we don't know where in the world the island would be. I could probably figure it out, but this is a top 10 list and I don't have that kind of time. So if I'm gonna do that, I'll have to save it for another video, and let me know if you actually want to see something like that in the comments. I have some ideas about how I could figure it out, but if you don't want the video, I'm not gonna force it on you and I'm not gonna force myself to do it. But yeah, other than we know it's within rowing distance of a mainland, that's all we have. Well, okay, we know it's within rowing distance for a father who is trying to make sure his son doesn't get killed by a giant demon train spider, so I think that it'll be a little further than your average Joe, or average Eugene in this case. Dare I say. I feel like a Joe would be able to row further than a Eugene though. I don't know. Like in my head, that's my opinion. Depends on the Joe though. Hey, that rhymed. And at 6, our origins. Something that I also was wondering while playing this game and made jokes about multiple times was, what the hell is a museum curator doing hunting a giant demon train spider? Okay, like the game, through Eugene, tells us at the beginning that we're trying to keep our museum in business and looking for something big to do it. We don't know what kind of museum we run, and I'm sure most people would assume that it's a monster museum of sorts, considering how he's like, oh yeah, this will be the biggest thing you have ever seen. But if it was a monster museum, firstly, that would never be close to going out of business, okay? Kids would be dragging their parents there all the time. If Ripley's Believe It or Not is still going and like has like a museum in Niagara Falls, a museum about monsters would be fine. And Eugene specifically asks if we're ready for monster hunting, which would imply it's something that we haven't done before. If it was our job, well, of course we would be ready. It's our job, but we seemingly aren't. We then also get referred to as a monster hunter multiple times by NPCs, but we're also referred to as the museum guy. So it's really hard to tell what exactly it is that we do. Plus, depending on your playstyle, you're fine with just straight up killing Warren's guards. I mean, this is justified as self-defense, but it's still taking someone's life, and you're also probably using a giant bazooka to do it. Speaking of which, my favorite weapon is the bazooka, by the way, and if you made it halfway through this list so you can actually see that, be sure you hit like and subscribe, because we're gonna be doing more Choo Choo Charles things, because y'all are loving it. That last video did really well. Halfway through into number 5, altars. Now, I thought that there was more to this game than there was. I really did. Specifically because there were 3 random altars that you could find around the map. One of them is across from the final temple, another is by a house with a locked door that has a secret behind it that calls you out for cheating, and another is closer to like what I would assume is the middle of the island. Like not like the middle of the top half, but like the middle of like the middle. My thinking was like 3 altars that all seem to be the perfect size for eggs, 3 eggs. I must be able to get like a secret ending or some cool ability by placing the eggs on these altars before I take them to the final fight, or instead of taking them, but no, they didn't do anything. You can't actually interact with them. They don't have anything around them that does anything. One might have a scrap, one has a note that starts talking about Gus the Bus, which is another entity on the mainland that Charles is scared of apparently, but it's just random ravings. I thought that these were gonna be like something insane where I was able to destroy all of the eggs at once and then it was actually a good ending, but it's just a crazy guy talking about a bus demon, so nope. What are they for? That's my question. They're there, there's 3 of them, they have to have a purpose. What is it? And at 4, Warren. Warren himself is really confusing to me as well, honestly, okay? Like, I don't think anyone has actually seen him before the final cutscene when I've watched people play. I didn't see him before the final cutscene. Where did he come from? Okay, how did he check on the temple that he'd assume is well guarded just as we're about to put the 3rd egg into the shrine thing? Like maybe he had heard about the egg thefts from the mines, sure, but if that was the case, he would have just upped the security at the temple to make sure that he didn't get put in a position where he had to convince someone that he'd never met before and has been told all sorts of horrific things about him that he's right to guard the eggs. Cause if that was me in that situation and like actually in that world not playing the game and I had the choice, or even if I was just playing the game and it gave me the choice to listen or to use the egg, damn straight I would have destroyed the eggs. I was told nothing but bad and suspicious things about Warren the entire game. I never saw him once. Only at that final cutscene did I ever see him, and if he was in the actual world, he would have stuck out like a sore thumb otherwise. Cause this man was dressed in a full yellow suit with a cowboy hat, like a discount Doug Dimmadome, owner of the Dimsdale Dimmadome. So how does he just show up out of nowhere, think that he'll convince us, and then die in a very evident way like it was supposed to be some big story moment? Like, sure, the secondary antagonist is dead, hooray, but like, why does that matter if we're about to kill Charles anyway? I don't know, it's a whole lot of weird going on here. I don't know what his plan was. Getting close to the end at number 3, Skyrim? Okay, now, I know that I'm biased because I love Skyrim. I have a Skyrim tattoo. But, considering how this is a giant demon train spider thing, we would think that it was the first time showing up on the island, right? It's based off one of the trains they have on the island. They haven't been here the whole time. They only recently got here. The first time they saw Charles was after they unearthed the eggs, but that's not the first time they've actually seen a giant spider on this island, apparently. At the beginning of the game, you can get a set of lockpicks from Daryl, the guy at the scrapyard. You pass it on your way to your first mission if you're following the track going forward. You use them to unlock the chest that Warren's goon had just thrown into the yard recently, and inside is a ancient tablet which is described as, quote, a very old stone tablet that features some strange drawings, which I feel like is a reference to Skyrim and the Dragonstone, okay? But like, what was off about this for me was that the ancient tablet had a drawing of people fighting a giant spider. I mean, it didn't have dragon burial mounds, which is unfortunate, but I mean, come on, okay? It was a normal giant spider, not one that looked like a train, so this isn't the first time it's happened. But then, this is also like the first item in the game, the first real side quest, the introduction of lock picking, and the whole ancient stone tablet thing makes me think that this is a Skyrim reference. And if it's not meant to be, you know what? That's fine. It's not a mistake, it's a feature. Todd Howard lives in all of us, and his influence just made it into the game without Gavin noticing. You're welcome, God Howard. But ultimately, in at number 2, Slender Man. If you remember back in like 2012 when Slender the 8 Pages was all the rage and Smosh was playing it and everyone and their moms was playing it. Actually, my mom did play it. But whether or not you remember it or not, you wanted to play it, or you didn't have the chance, then you can play it this time in Choo Choo Charles, kind of. There's an optional side mission that involves you having to grab a half of the paranormal pages from a nearby boulder field. You see, this woman that actually gives you the quest has been finding 16 pages pinned to lampposts in an area behind her house for multiple nights in a row. But last night, she got scared off by horrible noises and strange visions, and no longer feels safe walking out there. Despite, you know, a giant trained spider attacking the island for like the past 2 weeks at least or something. And she's just been casually walking around this boulder field, but now she's like, oh yeah, there's people are pinning up drawings, so I don't want to be here. Yeah. Good on you, ma'am. This island doesn't have any problems with IQ at all. But being the monster hunter museum curator archivist that you are, and you know, after being offered some scrap metal, you go and gather those 8 pages so that she can burn them, all while being chased by some form of pitch black creature with white glowing eyes and glowing outline that is flying at you with a mini tornado underneath them, and then if they catch you, you get teleported. It's legally distinct from Slender Man, but it's definitely a reference to one of the most iconic YouTube horror games of all time. And finally, in at number 1, Minecraft. Okay, so the mission where you have to bring that witch, like the fish for her stew, and then you have to be careful going through the swamp because of Barry, that has to be a Minecraft reference, right? I mean, it's not just me. I mean, like a witch with her cauldron in a swamp with her hut being over the swamp on stilts and very boxy, it feels like a Minecraft reference. And you see, I was kind of iffy on this Easter egg when I first thought of it, when I stumbled upon it in my playthrough of the game, but then when I read the recipe for her soup and saw dirt in it, and the fact that the monster looks very much like a realistic monstrous version of the Minecraft squid, kind of sealed the deal in my eyes, okay? This has to be a Minecraft reference. No way this many things lined up and it wasn't intentional. A random swamp in the middle of an island with 2 other mysterious paranormal monster entities on it, and then a man squid monster thing inside that swamp. No way, okay? No way this wasn't supposed to be a Minecraft reference. It had to be. Or my name's not Connor Monroe. And you know what? In my script, I spelt my name wrong. So no matter what happens, my bases are covered. I'm Connor Monroe spelt properly either way. I really hope that this was a Minecraft reference though, because I want this game that I love to reference another game that I love. And it's 10 out of bounds. There are multiple locked doors throughout Choo Choo Charles. Sometimes you have to find the key to unlock it. Other times it's a door to someone's house, so you really can't unlock it. But there's also one door in particular that is not only creepier than the others, but also isn't unlockable ever at all, and it's not even someone's house. Up on the northeastern area of the island, off the track, you can find a cabin surrounded by a moat of spikes, no doubt to deter Charles. However, in this cabin there is a mask for one of the cultists hanging on a bedpost, and a gate leading towards a creepy basement. The basement for most players simply contains 7 scrap. However, there is a locked door here as well. While I personally ignored this while playing, thinking thinking that I'd be brought back here at some point. I never was, because behind that door is actually just a room that contains a note. And the note, should you read it, simply says you shouldn't be in here because, you know, you shouldn't. It's out of bounds. You would have had to cheat to get here. I would have personally liked a "you're not supposed to be in here" joke as a reference to Skyrim, given the many other video game references in this game, but it's still cool nonetheless, and it's kind of funny. And if you're a cheater, then it calls you out for it. And it ate first priority. When I was playing the game, my first priority was upgrading my train's armor rating. I knew that this was going to be my game plan going in, but when I figured out that 1 scrap was required for 10% of your train repairs, it was an even better plan. I watched Eddie VR play it on his second channel, and he neglected armor, and it was getting him wrecked. So even in retrospect, I knew I had made the right call. But what I didn't realize was how insane that made my train rate off the bat. You see, I figured that if I didn't have to repair the train as often, then the damage in the end wouldn't really matter, or at least my damage rating. So I could focus on armor, and then I kept the speed and damage leveling together. So when it came to the fights with Charles, I could take some more hits before needing to repair, meaning that I could focus on damaging and working out a combat strategy. If I could at least keep pace with Charles so it was harder for him to catch up with me, and have my armor up at the same time, the lower damage I was dealing wouldn't really matter, since there is infinite ammo for the guns, and my train never ran out of fuel. So I could just keep going, and I could chip away slowly at his health if I needed to. But keeping armor up and then pairing the speed and damage was so insane, I actually ended up chasing Charles. I quite literally beat him and then went after him because I wasn't done with him yet. I was heated.
Get back here! I'm not done with you yet! Get back here, Shocker! I'll chase you to the ends of the earth!
And it's 7 POG Rocks. The development process for Choo Choo Charles took a while, as I'm sure actually quite a fair few of you know. The game grew and grew from its original idea and just got meme-ified along the way. And 2-Star was streaming parts of the development, which did gain some traction. So, in honor of everyone who was subbing during those streams, 2-Star added rock towers. Basically, they're stone cairns or Inukshooks, and there's 1 rock for each person who subbed. So, 1 tower will be made of multiple people who subscribed. To quote from 2-Star's Twitter, while playing Choo Choo Charles, you might find some strange rock piles. Each rock is dedicated to someone who subbed during the development live streams I did over the past year. They are POG Rocks. Very epic. So there you go. There's a nice little Easter egg and a way to get all those fans who subbed into the game. There you go. You're in the game, damn. I was tweeting at him trying to voice act in the game, but I'm not famous enough or good enough. And it's 6 Calamity Ganon. Okay, now this is by no means confirmed, and I doubt that this is actually the intent, but for some reason, the legs of Hell Charles to me seem very familiar. It's as if they're from another creature that I just can't think of, but they're like, it's frighteningly familiar. I feel like I'm in one of those like games or movies where like my brain gets wiped, or I have repressed memories that are slowly trying to poke through, like Sam Winchester when he got his soul back after being in hell. If I can remember exactly what it is, I may end up crumbling into a pile of dust and then have to fight off 2 other versions of myself in order to not die. But then again, my first thought was that these legs were of similar design to Calamity Ganon. Like color scheme and design wise, not that like they're holding giant weapons, but like, you know what I mean, okay? It seems like it could have been the inspiration for Hell Charles's legs, but no matter what, it's still pretty cool, and it looks freaking sick. But that's the connection I made, but I feel like there is something closer, and if you can think of what it is, if you can tell me what I actually have in my brain, because I cannot put the dots together, please let me know in the comments. Maybe it was like an Alduin retexture mod, but I don't even remember if I ate food today, so I have no clue. Also, if you're enjoying the video and want to see more, be sure you hit like and subscribe. Liking this lets us know that you want to see more, and subscribing makes us want to do it. Oh, and by the way, my favorite character is the Pickle Lady, because she's absolutely insane, and I was dying the whole time. Halfway through into number 5, Michigan. There's also the just sheer stupidity on the island that I feel like has to be some form of reference. My original questions about this game involved why nobody was doing anything about a giant train spider that was killing them off, which were partially addressed since it seems to be like a relatively new threat to them. But also, how is it that Eugene knows about the train that we can get at the beginning of the game, because the owner got killed right off the bat, but then also didn't know that there was a machine gun on it? So someone had to have added it, and if the engineer was dead, it couldn't have been him because he was dead. And then Eugene didn't know about it because he was off the island, so it wasn't him. So who added it? And when they did, why didn't they do anything with it? It was just sitting there. You literally could have ended this before me, but you didn't. And I can't forget Sergeant Flynn, who somehow didn't think to use the water tank above his burning shed to put out the fire, which every single person I have watched play the game has called out. Sergeant Flynn, more like Sergeant Flint, Michigan. Yeah, but also, do you want to know how that fire got started? Because he tested his flamethrower in a wooden shed. Not like aiming at or like a misfire. No, in. He was testing a flamethrower inside of a wooden shed while also being in the shed while testing a flamethrower in a wooden shed. God. I don't know. It has to be like, I feel like this has to be a joke with the name because of that though, right? Or am I just like a terribly disturbed individual? Okay, we know that. Or is it that I just think this because I am a terribly disturbed individual? I don't know. Also, hello to the jury. Hope you like the suit. In it for Momo. When you're getting Bob, the fourth gun in the game for most players, you end up getting sent to a Warren goon campout since they stole the barrels for the gun, for some reason. Even though they would be useless without the actual gun, but maybe they were trying to disable it. Anyway, in one of the rooms in this outpost, you can find various masks that the goons can spawn wearing. One of them looking very similar to the face of a figure commonly known as Momo, from the Momo Challenge way back in 2017. The Momo Challenge was a hoax and an internet urban legend that was rumored to spread through social media and other outlets. It was reported that children and adolescents were being enticed by a user named Momo to perform a series of dangerous acts, including violent attacks, harming others, and forever napping, because you know, YouTube doesn't like that word. Which seems to be a parody of the Blue Whale game, which had a similar sort of story, but despite claims that the phenomenon had reached worldwide proportions in July of 2018, the numbers of actual complaints was relatively small, and no law enforcement agency had confirmed that anyone was harmed as a direct result of it. So yeah, it was a hoax, but I mean, the face and like the Momo character, like that sculpture with the face, I don't know, it looked frighteningly similar, and it's something that I called out during my live stream. And finally, in at number 1, secret ending. Now, I originally thought that there was a secret ending to the game while I was playing, because there were a load of videos saying things like Choo Choo Charles all endings or all boss fights, but there doesn't seem to be, okay? That's why I was investigating those pillars I mentioned in the last number. I thought that they were also a key to a secret ending, but it seems like there's only the one ending that doesn't include your death. Yeah. There's also no hidden achievements or any normal achievements about another ending either, but there is one for the main ending. So I'm gonna use all of that information to work out that I was wrong there. But there really seems like there could have been, especially given the end credit scene of all those thousands of eggs that were colors we didn't even collect. I figured that there would be a secret better ending where we could destroy all of those, but apparently there's not. So there you go. If you're wondering about it, like I was, I promise you that there is no secret ending, unfortunately. Unless you're watching this a while later, and since then the game has been updated and added one. And it's 7, not the first time. Now, considering how this is a giant train spider demon thing, you'd figured that this is the first time it's showed up. I mean, it's literally based off one of the trains they have on the island, more on that in a minute, but the first time they saw Charles was after they unearthed the eggs, the ones that were the driving force behind this game's story. So what makes me think that this isn't the first time? Well, at the beginning of the game you can get a lockpit set from Daryl, the guy at the scrapyard. You know, you pass it on your way to the first mission if you follow the track. You use them to unlock the chest that Warren's goon had just thrown into his yard, and inside this is an ancient tablet which is described as a, quote, very old stone tablet that features some strange drawings, which I feel like is a reference to Skyrim and the Dragonstone, but that could just be me. But what was off about this one for me was that the ancient tablet had a drawing of people fighting a giant spider, but it was like a normal giant spider, not one that looked like a train, just a giant spider. So clearly this wasn't the first time this has happened. I wouldn't have paid any attention to it, but it was marked as a critical item according to the game. Picking it up gives you the notification of critical item acquired. Return to Daryl to complete your mission, which is a notification you don't even get when collecting the eggs. And it's 6, stupidity. There's also just the sheer stupidity on the island that I feel the need to address, okay? This needs to be talked about. So, my original questions for this game revolved around why nobody is doing anything about the giant train spider, which were partially addressed since this seems to be a relatively new threat to them in terms of like timeline in the game. game? But also, how is it that Eugene knows about the train that we can grab at the beginning of the game because the owner got killed right off the bat, but also doesn't know that there was a machine gun on the back? Someone clearly had to have added it, and if the engineer was dead, it wasn't him. Plus, Eugene didn't even know about it, so it couldn't have been him. So who added it? And if they added it, why didn't they take the fight to Charles their damn selves? Okay? Not to mention the other random brain farts, like Daryl not knowing how to use a lockpick. Like, dude, just look it up, okay? Or even like, just try it. Jimmy it around a little bit and hope that it works. It's been in the media for how long now? Come on. And I also can't forget Sergeant Flynn, who somehow didn't think to use the water tank above his burning shed to put out the fire. Sergeant Flint, more like Sergeant Flint, Michigan. But also, do you want to know how that fire started? Because he set off his flamethrower in a wooden shed. And yeah, I said in, not at, in. He was testing a flamethrower in a wooden shed while also being in that shed. He straight up deserved to die for that one, honestly, okay? That's not a win for natural selection. God, no wonder Charles was winning. And also, if you made it through this list, you're already halfway, so why don't you hit like and subscribe? And if you like the video enough, then we'll know you want more Choo Choo Charles, because this is fun. This is a fun list to write. Minute 4, unexplained origins. I hinted at this earlier on, but the actual origins of Charles and how he came to be are so freaking confusing. You see, the reason they call him Charles is because that's the name of the mining company run by Warren, the company that uncovered all of the eggs. But it's not because it's his fault that they're calling it that, it's because that's literally the train's branding. Since the trains are to transport materials, the trains are also Warren's. So, they're of course branded with the company logo, including our train before we start adding any armor to it. And all the other discarded trains that we find, like in the junkyard where you go to get the lockpick, they also have this branding on them. Charles somehow took control over or became a copy of the trains used by Warren and us while we play. How could that even happen? It's not like a hermit crab situation because Charles's face is on the front of the train. And if it was just a giant spider that was using the train like a shell, his face would like be in the caboose or something, okay? So what the hell is this thing if it took over or even replicated a train? Getting close to the end in at number 3, resource management. Okay, I kind of touched on this when I was talking about leveling your speed, but you don't have to worry about any resources in this game. You just need scrap. Other than that, you don't have to worry about fuel, coal, ammo, anything like that. You have infinite everything but scrap and health. So remember that when you're upgrading your train or fighting Charles. You won't run out of rockets, your train won't randomly stop. Going faster and having more armor doesn't use more fuel. Your train is basically a god, which is a question for MatPat to try and answer because, you know, we gotta leave him something. But this also makes me think that it would be interesting if Gavin, aka 2-Star Games, added a hard mode, like in an update or a DLC sort of thing, where you did have to worry about those sorts of resources. Like where at the mines you could get coal to fuel your train, and the goon camps could have ammunition for the various weapons. You could bring John Smith explosives and scrap and he could make rockets for you. It would change the game entirely, but maybe it would make it even better. It would definitely be more intense and would up the playtime, honestly. Because that's something that critics were mad at. Dude, so what? It's a short game. It's a fun short game. Deal with it. God. But ultimately, in at number 2, quick death. Now, this is mostly for speedruns, which is honestly great, but the quickest way to get back to your train sometimes is just death. Whether it be from fall damage, from enemies, from Charles, a quick death may be the easiest and fastest way through certain situations. With the berry mission, for instance. I'm not quite sure on the exact times, I haven't really worked out the math, but it might be faster to let Barry kill you, lose the scrap, and then run back to the witch from your train instead of trying to struggle through the swamp. Especially since Barry might decide to linger around you when you're standing still, which can happen. Damn it, Barry, they're going to change the timelines and now you're a squid monster on an island with a giant train spider? Damn. What, did you let your mom live for an extra 3 seconds this time? Is that what cost it? Anyway, losing the 3 scrap can cut out the RNG aspect of that mission, and the same is also true for when you get an egg, since you keep the items that you had before your death. So if you get an egg, you can get killed by a goon and wind up back at the train moving on to the next mission right away. It's an interesting strategy, of course, and it costs some scrap, but if you've spent all of it on your train or managed to keep your remaining scrap low, it could be a very good time saver. It all depends on your priorities. And finally, and at number 1, stealth level 0. While there are stealth sections to this game, like when infiltrating mines or at the various goon camps, for the outdoor sections, you don't need to use stealth at all. If you have the rocket launcher, you can do what I did for the final temple and just start letting them fly. The explosion of the rockets will not only kill enemies if you hit them, but it will also alert the ones who can't see you to your presence, drawing them towards the train and allowing for easy handling. If you do this, you can just walk up to the final egg receptacle and don't have to bother with the, let's be honest, fairly boring and rigid stealth, okay? I love the game, I love pure stealth, but the inability to crouch and it just being like a line of sight system kind of breaks the gameplay for me a little bit, you know? Kind of like, I don't know, it would feel better if I could crouch. Even if it was just line of sight, if I just had the ability to crouch, it would have been exponentially better. So if you want to forego the parts of the stealth that are outside, you can just start spamming with your infinite rockets. Plus it's fun, because you know, they're rockets and you're just sending them. Sure, they are said to have horrible range, but just like with arrows, rocks, or anything that you're shooting or throwing, aiming up will help them go further than just firing them straight. I was able to essentially clear the temple using this before I actually walked up to it by luring the goons out with rockets, but I also managed to kill one without even knowing that he was there, so that made me feel pretty damn cool. 10 shapeshifter. Okay, so the possibility of Charles, the, you know, giant demon train spider, being a shapeshifter isn't lost on me, okay? I mean, this thing is a train with giant spider legs sticking out of its body. Plus, you know, the whole having a thirst for blood thing. How else are you supposed to get a giant spider that's shaped like a train? I don't really know. I don't know what else could turn into this other than something that can change its shape, okay? Unless it's like a demon that's just picked two of the worst things on the planet. And I mean, like, spiders are like the worst thing on the planet, but having to talk about Thomas the Tank Engine on the internet is also apparently even more risky. Yes, apparently, the Thomas fans are even hornier for trains than FNAF fans are for wolf and chicken animatronics. Wasn't there like a whole Facebook group against this game? Like Thomas fans against Choo Choo Charles or something? Or was that just a dream I had after there was like a whole bunch of like Christians against seedless watermelons or something? I don't know. It might have been in my dream. But either way, the whole shapeshifter angle makes sense given what we're dealing with here. As long as it's not like the supernatural style shapeshifter where they can only change into humans. In at 9, Evil Thomas. Speaking of which, could this just be an evil version of Thomas the Tank Engine? You might think that this sounds crazy, but come on, okay? I mean, where else are we going to find a train that looks like this? It's like the one clip from Rick and Morty's intro from season 5, you know, like the one where they're at the dinner table, then all their heads pop off and they start running around the birthday cake. That's how I feel like this would have started, but instead of it being like a head, it's Thomas. You might be thinking that it can't be Thomas because this train is red and not blue, but firstly, blood, it can be quite the pigment, but also maybe it's just James or Thomas that got possessed and then turned red or something, okay? It's a giant train spider. You can't really like say that this isn't logical. Maybe the color of their trains is like the lanterns from DC Comics, like with each color representing a different emotion, and when Thomas got too angry, he went from blue to red, and then sprouted legs and got a taste for blood instead of oil. Or maybe the red trains are colored that way because they run off of blood instead of oil, or something. I don't know. I can't wait for my DMs to be flooded with haters. In an 8 story. The story also seems to be a really tricky thing because whenever you look for it online, you basically just get this Steam description saying that it's a train spider that you have to kill. All the Steam page says is, quote, complete the main quest line. And while it makes sense that the main quest line is about beefing up your train to fight Charles, the bigger question is what does the actual storyline of that main quest involve beyond that? It's interesting and we don't really have much information, but we can help out the settlers in return for high-powered weapons and other vital items, at least if we believe the Steam page. But my question is, if they have all this stuff on them already, why haven't they just dealt with Charles themselves? Why are we the only ones beefing up this train on a random island to take out a giant demon train spider? Like, if the settlers in these towns have these weapons or items or knew about them, why aren't they handling it? Okay, we're just a human too, right? It's not like the Dragonborn just parachuted onto this island and now it's our destiny. Where's the initiative? This is your lives too. You just comfortable going to sleep knowing that you might be eaten by a giant train? And it's 7 weapons. Right off the bat, personally, I suggest getting all of the weapons that you can. Sure, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter all that much. You can do the final fight with the original machine gun, but having all 4 guns right off the bat will be a great help to you, even if you don't have much scrap. crap. The bug spray can slow, the RPG is a massive damage dealer, and Bob is just fun to use and a damn good sniper. All around, they're gonna be useful, especially at the beginning of the game, and then you can worry about upgrading the damage for your train. You have enough time after the first Charles encounter to get some armor and a couple weapons before he shows up again, and if you reverse on the track, you can get the RPG sooner than later. I wonder what happens if you try to leave the barn in reverse, like instead of going forward. Huh. Does it let you? I'm gonna have to try that. And at 6, dive. Okay, so Barry and the whole swamp mission thing is a pain in the ass. It is, okay? It's the most intense mission of the game. You're helpless in a swamp and you can hardly move forward. And it takes ages to get there and back. However, it is worth noting that you don't have to drop off the dock into the swamp. You can get a running start and jump off the dock to get even more distance before actually having to deal with the hazard. It's a decent amount given the alternative, and it works the same way on the way back from the island, but there's no real dock there. You just have to jump off the edge of the island, and it won't be as effective, but it still helps. I saw people just dropping off the dock, but if you stay out of the water, you avoid the hazard of Barry for longer. Plus, it doesn't add like 10 minutes to the length of the mission. It's not much, but it's honest work. Also, if you've made it this far and you like Choo Choo Charles, hit like and subscribe, alright? We can do more videos if you keep wanting them, so be sure you let us know. And by the way, my favorite moment was when I told Charles that he was stuck on the island with me. It was fun. Halfway through at number 5, speed. Whoa, settle down. Not what I mean, okay? I mean as a secondary train upgrade, take speed over damage. While yes, armor was my top priority, my thinking was that if I could at least keep pace with Charles as well, so it was harder for him to catch up, and then have my armor up, the lower damage I was dealing wouldn't really matter, since there was infinite ammo and my train never ran out of fuel. I could just keep going and chip away at him slowly if I needed to, and this turned out to be accurate, especially when you have the slowing weapons like the bug spray flamethrower. This also helps when you're using the rocket launcher, because the further you can keep from Charles, the more you can hit him with the most damaging weapon, which is best no matter where your train or what your train damage is at. MatPat thought the damage and armor were the best ideas, but speed and armor are the way to go because of, the rocket launcher. If you try and hit Charles with the rockets without the speed, you're going to be doing that same damage to your train as well. And that's not worth it, because then it takes the scraps, then they get used more often, and no matter what your armor is, you're going to be repairing a lot. Come on. I've never died to Charles, by the way, alright? I only died twice, because of Barry, because I didn't know that he spawned behind you, and then once in the final mine, when I got caught with a goon's shotgun in my mouth, when I didn't realize I couldn't go back up. That sounded worse than I hoped it would, but oh well, I've said it. Getting close to the end into number 3, Dream Theory. Speaking of pulling a FNAF, there's also the classic "this is just a dream" idea. The idea that none of this is actually happening, but it's just some messed up nightmare that we'll wake up from after killing Charles, which might be one of the most intense dreams I've literally ever heard about at all. Like, yeah, my dreams can be weird sometimes, but they're never I have to fight off a giant train spider demon thing, okay? The weirdest I can get from recent memory that I actually know I dreamt about and that I wasn't possibly thinking that I dreamed about and might not have actually happened was that I was dating a girl from another Earth. Yeah, it was like DC Earth 2, and that's where she lived, which is, trust me, is worse than saying she lives in Canada, which I mean, I guess that's a common thing in the US, but since I live in Canada, I can't really say that because no shit. It's like I don't lie about it anymore, but like mine used to be she goes to another school. So whichever one you use, it's even worse than that one. Nevertheless, even in my weird alternate reality girlfriend's Earth, nobody was dreaming about Thomas getting bit by a freaking radioactive spider. Nobody. But ultimately, in number 2, why? This is a question that many people struggle with in general. Like, why? Why anything, really? Why do we have to breathe? Why does our blood need oxygen? A lot of questions are centered around the idea of why. But when it comes to this game, the why I'm worried about is why the actual living is there a giant train spider on this random island? Seriously, how does this happen? How does a giant train spider actually come about? And why are we the ones who have to fight it? Why isn't anyone else doing anything? Why is it that Charles is seemingly only focused on killing us? Is it because we have like the little engine that reminds him of his Stephen King origins? Or is it because he's just a messed up guardian from Breath of the Wild gone unhinged? Why is literally anything happening in this game? I don't know, obviously, otherwise this wouldn't be a theories list, it would be an answers list. But still, this is the biggest question that I can't wait to have answered when the game comes out. And finally, in number 1, cult. There's also one other recurring enemy in Choo Choo Charles that isn't a giant train spider. I'm gonna keep saying giant train spider because that's the description. Instead, it's a cult surrounding that giant train spider. And honestly, I have no idea why they formed a cult. Maybe, perhaps they see him as some form of god, since I mean I'm fairly certain trains becoming spiders would be a rare thing even in this universe, but how did they start that? Who started the idea that he was a god? Like, was someone saved by Charles? Like, by just being in the right place and then getting attacked with Charles just over yonder, and then as they were tearing apart those people, he ran away? I don't know. Was it Bob the engineer who abandoned Charles, who now just wants to make amends? Or is it just some crazy guy who thought that they were meant to be subservient to the giant train with spider legs? I don't know. But what I do know is that they're big enough to have multiple camps around the island. I'm guessing that they're going to be storing a fair few of the key items needed to fight off Charles, and they're going to be a major pain in the ass. Hopefully they aren't drinking ink though, because we all know how that ends. It's a bendy reference for you guys. And at 10, what is Charles? Okay, I think we could all agree that Charles isn't an ordinary spider. I think that's pretty obvious. But even by like demon spider train standards, he's not normal. He has colored eggs. He can absorb the energy from those eggs when you attempt to destroy them. And then he has a giant form that is quite literally supposed to be a form from Satan's domain. It's literally called Hell Charles, for God's sakes. Like, how is any of this possible? What could Charles be? Obviously, he's not a demon, because those don't lay eggs. He's not the first of his kind. The stone tablet from the beginning of the game gives that away. There were literal ruins on the island based around these eggs. So, what in the living hell would be the reason for any of this? Of course, the real reason is Charles, but it couldn't have been when these temples were created. This wasn't specifically Charles. So like, what's really going on with this giant train spider demon from hell that isn't actually a demon? And at 9, evacuation. According to Eugene at the start of the game, the island had actually started evacuations after the discovery of Charles, and that he was one of the first ones off the island. But then, apparently, they seemingly stopped evacuations after this. This could have been because of Warren, and I think the game partially hints at that. But my question is, why the hell are these people listening to some mining corporate stooge about leaving these random people who aren't mining workers on the island? Warren interfering or not, what I can only assume is the government not evacuating as many people as they can. What the hell? Why? Plenty of people still want to go back to the mainland. There's one guy even waiting for another boat. Charles apparently destroyed the last one, but has nobody found that suspicious? Has nobody on the mainland thought, huh, that boat isn't back yet, and they aren't answering any of my calls? Maybe something's wrong. No! There's none of that. We have to row with Eugene back to the island. And if it's within rowing distance, why would they think it's taking so long to bring people back? They wouldn't think that. It wouldn't take that long. So what's the deal? What's the deal with airline food? You know I'm a white comedian because I'm making this voice. That's how it works. Comedy. And at 8, island origins. Now, Charles isn't the only thing that's weird on this island. I mean, like, not only is there a giant demon train spider attacking people, but there seems to be active measures against Charles on the island. And it's there when they arrive. It's not like Warren and his goons built it. So why did whoever was here before build all of this? Clearly they've had to fight off a being like this before thanks to the drawing on the tablet. But what happened that caused the island to be abandoned or go extinct enough that Warren wouldn't really think about starting his operation here? Because if this worked, that wouldn't make sense, because they would have had to fail in order for Charles to show up. But clearly they didn't fail originally, because they fought off their version of this giant spider. Unless Charles was laying dormant for ages until they unearthed his eggs. But then, why would he have showed up looking like a train used by the mining company? My original theory was that the island itself was possessed by an evil entity that Warren was using to make his fortune, kind of like a Betrayal at House on the Hill sort of thing, since in that game the house itself is possessed by evil. But that seems to not be the case, even though there are also giant duck that is possibly a kaiju, a swamp monster that is, I'm pretty sure, is a reference to squids from Minecraft, and oh yeah, Slenderman. Slenderman. A copyright distinct version of Slenderman. And at 7, Stephen King connection. Now, this certainly is an interesting theory. I could have sworn the name of this game was Choo Choo Charlie. It was like my own personal Mandela effect. But when I looked into things for this video, I learned of Charlie the Choo Choo, a children's book by Stephen King, of all people. Charlie the Choo Choo is from the world of The Dark Tower, and it's a storybook by Stephen King, published under the name of Beryl Evans. The story was written by King and published in King's previous novel, The Dark Tower 3: The Wastelands, wherein the book is found by Jake in chapter 22. And the story is intended to be creepy and give children nightmares, which I personally think makes a hell of a lot of sense, since this game also seems to be attempting the same thing. Also because it looks like Thomas. In the book, Charlie gets abandoned by his engineer Bob in favor of a newer, better model, and then there's even a picture of Charlie crying dark, oily tears and getting, like, all rusty. He then gets repaired by Bob, but what if he didn't? Maybe that's the story that Choo Choo Charles is trying to tell. And at 6, Hell on Earth. Or I guess Earth in hell would be more accurate. You see, this doesn't seem like anywhere that would reasonably exist on any Earth, okay? Like, I get that it's an island, not close to anything like no major cities or whatnot, but also, there is no goddamn way that the world's military does not know about Charles. Like, if you so much as juice an olive onto a plate, the US is going to invade it, so how would they not have seen this island, investigated it, and then just left it? That would have been the next damn target for any form of weapons test, okay? My thinking is that given that this is a giant train spider that seemingly comes out of nowhere, that the settlers have the means to stop him and aren't really doing it because somehow you're the only one who's willing to, and the fact that this is an island, meaning that you can't get off of it, and you'll probably have to kill him just so you can get onto a boat in peace, that this is just a simulated world space and that you're actually in hell, because you know what, this is my personal hell. Whether this is like a Dante's Inferno situation, or maybe you're just having the best Diablo run of your life, I can't be sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's revealed to be just one of the many layers of hell, and someone finally decided to rebel against the situation. Or maybe we play as Satan, who is trying to test the settlers to see if they'll do anything about Charles themselves, and they don't. How we doing to number 5, Hype Conspiracy. The hype around Choo Choo Charles is actually pretty damn high, especially considering the minimal marketing. I mean, it was like right next to Resident Evil, Spider-Man, and another game that I'm forgetting the name of on the Steam wish list a while ago, or before Spider-Man came out for the PC. But it also just started off as a challenge on the 2-Star Games YouTube channel. The challenge being to develop a game within a year. But as the project grew, the game got delayed multiple times, understandably, especially considering how it's one dude. But this begs the question, would it have succeeded without those delays? Putting aside the higher quality of the models, the textures, etc., if the game that was releasing on Friday was released after that year challenge, would it have done as well? Online conspiracy theorists think no, and think that this year-long challenge was a marketing ploy to help generate hype for the game, which ultimately worked. And honestly, I don't know if this is accurate or not. I've known about the game for a while, personally, for over a year. I thought it had released when I learned about it the first time, but it hadn't, and I was disappointed. But if this is all marketing, absolutely brilliant. That is some genius level marketing there, and it didn't cost really anything, okay? It grew because of people talking about it, and then people talking about it made it grow more. It's that kind of marketing that people have been trying to replicate since the Blair Witch Project, and I respect it. Okay? I went to school for that. That's damn impressive. Okay? If it was intentional, well done. If it wasn't intentional, well done either way, okay? Good job, 2-Star. Good job. And for Eternal Torment. In the same vein as the layer of hell idea, what if this is just pulling a FNAF and making all of this just the eternal torment of our player character? Well, I say that, although that isn't the case with Ultimate Custom Night anymore, but still, maybe when they were living, they weren't a good person, or maybe they just pissed off the wrong people, because I stand by the fact that a giant train spider, okay, is even too damn fantastical for a video game based in reality. Of course, I could be wrong, I usually am. The creator can do whatever they want in their worlds and we just have to believe it and accept it. But so much is unexplained. The same reasons for why it could be a layer of hell apply to why this is just our own personal hell. Nobody else knows about this, the unexplained origins of Charles, the settlers just accepting that they could die at literally any point despite having the means to stop their tormentor. It feels like they're setting us up to be the hero intentionally, and that if we do actually come close to taking out Charles, that we'll just have to start the cycle all over again. Because the real torture is being unable to win despite knowing that you would have. That little part of the human brain that can't leave a level unfinished or can't quit in the middle of something. That could be what ultimately destroys us in this game, and not a giant train spider. Why is that the villain? Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Hell Charles. So the actual origins of Charles and how he came to be are extremely confusing. You see, the reason they call him Charles is because that's the name of the mining company run by Warren, the guy who's been uncovering the eggs. You know, the one that I just talked about, yellow monkey suit. It's like the man from Curious George and Doug Dimmadome combined. That's basically what I see when I look at him. Yeah, that guy. And that's the name of the company. And they're not calling him that because like they blame him for Charles. It's because that's like the branding on the train. The trains are meant to transport materials, therefore the trains are Warren's and are branded with the company logo, including the train that we're using before we start adding any armor to it and then it gets covered up. And all the other discarded trains we find along the way, like in the junkyard where you get the lockpick, and various other locations like outside of mines. They all have the Charles branding, which implies that Charles somehow took control over or became a copy of the trains used by Warren and used by us as we play. How could that even happen? And then, on top of that, he can absorb the energy from his eggs when they're being destroyed, and when he does do so, he transforms into an even more monstrous version of himself called Hell Charles. What the absolute fuck? This answers none of the questions that I had, it only gives me more. Bro, Hell Charles? But ultimately, in at number 2, Secret Intentions. One question I had this whole time was if Warren really was planning on digging for gold like he originally was saying. I don't know. Or was it his intention to find Charles and his eggs from the beginning? We can't really be sure. He definitely does seem like he has hidden intentions and like he's not telling us something that he knows. But in a note that you can find in the tall tower when trying to take the miner's contract for the dude who's too fat to climb the tower, that's literally what the plot of the mission is. I don't know how else to say that. You end up finding a journal entry of sorts that mentions how he doesn't think he'll find any gold on this island. Unless he's writing his journals in code, which I don't see why he would be doing. Like, I don't know why this would be a lie. Why would you lie to yourself in your journal, especially if you're leaving it at the tallest tower on the island that nobody should really be able to access because it's falling apart unless they're us because we're seemingly the Dragonborn. But then when we do get to the final battle, he tells us that we'll kill a lot more people than we'll save if we follow through with our plan, but he never says how, he never says why, or he never says how he knows that. His guards also dress up like Charles worshippers. So at this point, I honestly don't know what this man's intentions are, unless the masks are meant to make Charles think that you're one of his babies or something and maybe he doesn't attack you, which is a whole other can of worms that I do not want to mess with today. And finally, in at number 1, Extravaganza. The biggest twist of the game comes to us in the final cutscene, after the credits. Much like any movie released nowadays, we get something after the credits that has insane implications. One of those being that there's about 1 million more Charles eggs, and that us destroying those 3 from the actual story means nothing in the grand scheme of things. But this begs the question, what the hell are these for? Okay, we kill Hell Charles, and then we see the 4th egg shaking, and then it pans out and you get like 3,000 more. This gives me multiple questions. 1, why are there so many goddamn eggs? 2, where are these all located? Is this what they were searching for in that unmarked mine by the lighthouse? And if it is, what were they planning on doing with them? Why would they guard those 3 eggs if they knew about the others? And what are all these eggs for? Are they really eggs in like a sense that they'll hatch more Charles? Because like they don't look like spider eggs, but this is also a giant train spider. And we know that this just has happened before, thanks to that stone tablet.